Hey everybody, welcome to the Blendr Report, where news meets rational thinking. I'm your host, Jonathan Harvey. This is your co-host, Liam DeBoer. Liam, what are we talking about today?
Today, we're going to be chatting about Canada's violent long weekend proving the need for castle laws, euthanasia being provided without oversight as the dark reality of MAiD is being exposed, and the watchful eye growing over everyday Canadians. All right, let's get started. So, first off, we've got violent long weekend proves Canada needs a castle law. Over a single long weekend, 4 violent crimes in Vaughan, Calgary, Mississauga, and Welland exposed the same failure. Canada's justice system cannot or will not keep predators off the streets. In Vaughan, a father was executed in front of his family during a home invasion. In Calgary, Elvis Vukaj cycled endlessly through bail hearings, ankle monitors, and warrants until dying in a standoff with police, despite facing charges for shooting a homeowner, a dog, and running extortion schemes. In Mississauga, suspects armed with a knife and claiming a gun stole a luxury vehicle from a driveway, and in Welland, a trans suspect allegedly broke into a home and assaulted a child under 5. These are not rare shocks, but predictable outcomes of catch-and-release policies, weak enforcement, and no jail capacity. The proposed answer? A Canadian castle law that clearly affirms citizens' right to defend their homes and families without fear of prosecution. So, if politicians refuse this reform, what does it say about their attitude toward the people they govern?
Well, for starters, they don't care. You know, I think that there's a much deeper issue here, and I think it kind of rolls back into a two-tier justice system that we have. And I think it has to do with, you know, sort of building out this Canada 2.0 thing and really making way for a lot of new immigrants to sort of find their way through the country without getting in trouble so they can stay. I think that's one of the big reasons that the Liberal government's not really moving too heavy into this. You have 2 bills, C5 and C75, I believe, that are, you know, catch and release, basically low sentencing on crime and violent crime, things that they should be spending a lot of time in jail for. So, you know, when you kind of look at the compound effect of these things, if you're not going to get in any trouble for doing anything, you're going to be more brazen about it. So you're sort of enabling criminals to behave in such a way, right? And then the other thing is when you've created sort of a two-tier justice system to make sure that you can continue to scale immigration, you sort of have a compound effect of the same thing. I understand they can be different cohorts, but you see how that's going to make this, it's going to, basically, I said, it's going to enable these people. Now, that's one side of it. The other side of this really is we've been governed by virtue for too long. We've been governed by left-wing ideology that believes in this idea of equality. And what happens when you do this? A lot of bad things happen, but in this particular case, you know, they take away the right for people to defend themselves. They try to take away people's guns and all these other things, but it's all under this banner of equality and virtue. It's all these nice ideas that in a perfect world, we don't need X. It's not a perfect world. But again, they put these systems in because they've been the ruling party for over 10 years now. What happens is you sort of run out of good ideas, but you have to continue to cast your net over top of things. So it is just basically removed the entire justice system from being effective in Canada whatsoever. And when it comes to castle law here, we've never really had it. We've had something that sort of hovers around it, but we've never really had a castle law in Canada. I think that in the past, based on how Canada came to be prior to maybe this generation, you might have been able to argue that it wasn't necessary. Canada always wore the badge of we're a polite society, we're good people. That's kind of what we were. I don't really think on the individual level that's what it's been, but on a macro level, I can sort of understand things, you know, being perceived that way. It's dramatically different now. Our crime outpaces America per capita when it comes to violent crime. So we have a much bigger problem. So we need a different set of tools. And I think they're sort of governing a little bit using sort of the badge that we used to wear. So I would say, you know, that's kind of being charitable, saying, okay, well, if this is the way the country operated, we didn't need these things. We're going to continue operating through this lens of virtue signaling, essentially. So we're not going to implement any of these things that are going to be considered harsh or could be used disproportionately against marginalized communities and people that need reform, not punishment. So you sort of see how those things start working together. And that's why I don't think we have anything in place. I don't, as much as I want to say it, I don't really think the individuals that are running the country don't want us to be safe or don't care about us at all. I think some of them are psychopaths, but in general, I think when you talk to most MPs and most people, yeah, they want you to be safe. They want you to be okay. They really do, because chaos doesn't help anybody, really.
This is the fallacy, though, that I think the vast majority of Canadians fall under, which is our MPs are not directing legislation and they're not in charge. They're better thought of as spokespeople for the Prime Minister's office.
Yes.
And so you've got these unelected people, the Gerald Butts, the Katie Telfords of Canada, who are the same people that were in Justin Trudeau's corner, that are in Carney's corner, that bring these policies from these global bodies into Canada. And then our MPs end up just becoming, they really are better thought of as salespeople
Rubber stampers,
than as your representatives.
Yeah.
They're there to sell those policies to you rather than take the policies you want to the Prime Minister.
Agreed.
And actually, one thing that I thought was crazy, this is kind of a sidebar, but I was reading Andrew Coyne's book, who wrote Crisis in Canadian Democracy. And one thing that he was mentioning was that even the MPs, their like number one staffer gets approved by the PMO. So essentially every MP is put with a oversight.
Yeah,
from
somebody with, interesting.
Yeah. But so you see that, okay, even Pierre Poilievre came out in this weekend talking about the need for castle laws, which I fully support, but maybe we'll just play that clip really quickly.
Conservatives are standing here today based on the principle that your home is your castle. We're calling on the government to introduce and immediately pass the Stand on Guard law, failing which one of our party's MPs will put forward such a bill. It will amend Section 34.2 of the Criminal Code, which right now says that you can defend yourself based on 9 very complicated and vague conditions. Now look, if you're defending your house, you don't have time to think through 9 different conditions. You have one condition: to protect yourself and your kids. And it is wrong for the law, for the police, and for judges to apply a complicated, indecipherable legal doctrine against you when you were only doing what is right. Our amendment instead will change Section 34.2 of the Criminal Code to say that the use of force, including lethal force, is presumed reasonable against an individual who unlawfully enters a house and poses a threat to the safety of anyone inside. The proposed amendment is reasonable and prudent. It applies only to the unlawful entry of a home and preserves proportionality. Simply put, it means you have the right to use force to defend your home and your family against someone who threatens you and who has entered illegally.
And then Sean Fraser, our Justice Minister, responded to that announcement by Poilievre saying, "This isn't the Wild West, it's Canada. Canadians deserve real solutions that make us safer, not slogans that inspire fear and chaos for Pierre's political survival." So, okay, first of all, you have made Canada into the Wild West. Even you just see that throughout this weekend.
He also said that before the long weekend when all this shit happened.
Yeah.
Like, egg on your face. I hate that bad things have happened to people, but like, if it were going to happen, that was the time.
And look, there was some especially egregious cases this weekend, but this has been going on for years.
For sure. It's just that when you see these two guys battling and this guy saying something that's sort of supporting what I was saying earlier, they're governing through virtue and the old Canada. It's funny, he said it's not the Wild West, but it's like you're governing like it were old Canada, like it were 30, 40 years ago,
right,
when people left their, like, remember Bowling for Columbine? So people's vision of Canada, there was a section in that where people think that Canadians leave their doors unlocked, their cars unlocked, everybody's great, everybody's wonderful. That's what Americans think of Canadians.
Well, I used to. Like, I grew up, we would leave our door unlocked.
30, 40 years ago. And that's what I'm saying is we don't live in those times anymore. And we don't live in those times for a number of reasons, primarily due to liberal policy that basically infiltrated the country.
Yeah. And so one thing that I think I wanted to pick your brain about here as well is because I see some people, whether it's the trans shooter at the school recently in the
Minnesota.
States last week, or whether it's the trans suspect that broke into a home and assaulted the child under 5.
Yes.
People on the opposite side, like let's say the liberals, will sit there and say it's not relevant. Them being trans, it's not relevant to the conversation. That's an anomaly, especially in the case of this. But I go, how can you tell me that your sexuality is extremely important? It's a core tenet of who you are as a being, whether you're trans or whether you're gay,
Sure.
this or that. And then you commit a sexual offense, and you want me to tell me that your sexual identity doesn't have anything to do with you committing that offense. You're telling me that your sexuality is a primary driver of who you are.
Yes.
But then when negative things happen and people point to that primary driver,
Yes.
then other people go, no, you can't make that assumption.
Yeah, I mean, they're cherry picking the data to suit them whenever they want, right? There's actually a much bigger problem here I'm seeing with the trans stuff, and it's that if you start so after last week's shooting in Minnesota, a bunch of people started talking about how frequent they're seeing trans violence, like trans individuals committing heinous acts of violence, and it was a longer list than I had actually expected. And then someone put things up as a percentage. And as a percentage, their community is disproportionately committing heinous acts of violence. So you kind of have to look at that. And, this goes a little beyond maybe the sexual act that you saw, because obviously I think it's all relevant. And this may come across a little harsh, but it's not my intention. Up until recently, a few years ago, if you thought you were trans, it was considered a mental illness. That's what it was considered by all governing bodies. This is a mental illness. You don't think you're in the right body. Something ain't right. That was their take. Now they've updated it, and now we want to have compassion and all this other stuff. But here's the problem. If the fact is you think you're in someone else's body, or you think you should be in another body, here's what I struggle with. How could you know you should be a woman if you're a man? You don't know what it's like to be a woman. You're just confused. That's the harsh reality of the whole situation. So something in general with the majority of these people, other than people that are doing it just to fit in these days, these kids, but people that think that they fall into this category, generally something's not right up top. They've been damaged mentally, emotionally. Something's happened. Okay, so they're mentally unwell. Now society goes and says, we've got the solution for you. Here's what it is, and we're going to be compassionate. Here's your solution. So there's a statistic that I think a lot of people don't know of. Suicide rates actually increase in trans people post-surgery, post-op. It's actually worse, I think 7 years post-op is the peak. So you don't make things better for them. You actually sold them a solution that was not the right thing to do. I'm sorry, it just wasn't. I don't know what the right thing to do is. I'm not pretending like I've got the answer, but I can poke a bunch of holes in the entire strategy that they're currently using. So what you're doing is you're taking a situation with someone that's mentally unstable, and you're actually making it worse. And now we live in a society where people are starting to claw back on things. You're not seeing as many rainbow flags at Pride Month. You're seeing Trump push back against a lot of this stuff. You're seeing people in general go, hey, I've had it up to here. I'm done. I'm done with all this shit. Be who you want to be. It's not my business. I don't care. But they made them rock stars for a little while. So now you've got a compound effect of someone who's mentally unstable that you put in the spotlight and made a rock star. Now you're reversing course. So now I think you've got these people falling off the end of a depression cliff. I think that's why you're seeing a spike in it now. I think that's why you're seeing more trans violence, and I think that's why you're going to continue to see more of it. So that's a little outside of what you asked. I just think that it's relevant to mention that I think we're going to go through this period where this is going to continue, and we're going to have to continue to sort of highlight it, because I think the media is going to do their best to hide it, because they were the ones championing this, and so are these politicians. But again, you ask why they say it's not relevant. Well, because if it is relevant, then you have to explain yourself over the last several years, because I imagine they're seeing what I'm seeing going, oh shit, this is getting a little out of hand. There's a disproportionate number of trans people committing violent acts. So now we've got an issue. We put these people on a pedestal, and now they're a real problem. So we can't admit they're a problem, or what we did over the last several years by giving children all this other crap, putting them through surgeries, transitioning, promoting this idea. That was maybe not the right thing to do. So they simply can't admit it. So anytime it pops up, they have to go, well, that's not relevant. That's got nothing to do with this. It's just going to be sort of this classic case of I did nothing wrong. We just need to spend more money on it.
Yeah, I think the big question there is whether it's okay, does being trans make you, and then say getting on these hormone blockers and really screwing with your biological systems
yes, it does.
make you more likely to be unstable? Or I think there's also, and it can be both too. I don't think it has to be one or the other, but I think there's also another aspect which goes, okay, let's say you've got a violent criminal that wants to carry out these acts, and then looks at it and goes, well, there's this sacred class that so it's like the trans thing isn't even a driver for them as much as it is a disguise. They're like,
there's two characters. Right. I agree. There's two archetypes. Now, one thing I will say, you touched on the balance of hormones. If people have been following us for a while, they know I have an autoimmune condition. Don't worry, it was pre-COVID. I didn't get it from a vaccine. I got it because I've just had my foot on the gas for too long. It's called Graves' disease. It fucks with your hormones and your thyroid. So my thyroid's overactive. Now, what happens when you get this? And I don't need any sympathy. That's not what I'm looking for. I don't care. It's very manageable. So anyway, what happens when you get this, though, prior to getting treatment, because they don't know what it is, it could be a myriad of things. You're trying to figure it out. Your hormones get wildly out of whack. Wild. Your test drops, your estrogen goes up. You are like not, you are a shell of the human you were. I dropped like 20, 30 pounds. I was unwell for like 6 months. Now, again, this was in 2020. Now, I can tell you with confidence, when your hormones are completely out of whack, you are not mentally the same person. You don't sleep as well. Your temper is incredibly short. You're frustrated all the time. Your body's not operating the way that it's supposed to operate. There is a perfect balance to how your body operates. And when you throw that out of whack by elevating or decreasing those hormones, your entire system is flashing red. You are in like an emergency mode. So if you're giving this, and it's an interesting perspective that I have. I don't want people to go through this. I don't want like, it was unfortunate, but I can at least appreciate that I understand it. And I knew what was happening to me, and I didn't want it to happen, so I wasn't like cheering it on. I was working to get out of it, which we did, obviously. So, but my point here is, I know for sure, I can say with 100% confidence, when you give kids these drugs or the people these drugs, it totally fucks them up, and it makes them angry and irritable and frustrated. They're not thinking straight. For sure. This is not speculation. This is definitely, it's my own experience. It's not a good state to be in. So yeah, I would say that it is significantly enhancing their capacity to do bad things.
Yeah, and I'd just to cap it off, I'd say the likelihood that they're also on multiple things, so it's not like hormone blockers are the only thing they're taking. They're probably also taking SSRIs and stuff and all of this nature. And then so you've just got this concoction that is just completely, one thing's throwing something out of balance, then another thing's trying to balance that, but throwing something else off of balance. And then it's just this massive just pill game.
Oh yeah.
And I think that's probably something that is driving a lot of the isolation, the mental illness, all of that within society. I think the running to prescriptions is probably making things a lot worse. But anyways, moving on to our next story, we've got euthanasia without oversight, the dark reality of MAiD in Canada. British Columbia's Medical Assistance in Dying, or MAiD program, is under fire for weak oversight and reluctance to hold providers accountable, even when they say they may have broken the law. Freedom of Information documents show BC's oversight unit discouraged referrals of rule-breaking providers to police or regulators, warning that strict enforcement might deter doctors from offering euthanasia. Critics argue this protects providers over patients. A 2021 case highlighted a physician who ignored an assessor's finding of ineligibility and proceeded with euthanasia, potentially violating the criminal code. In 2023, BC recorded 2,759 MAiD deaths, the third highest in Canada, alongside 2,833 reporting errors, nearly 500 tied to eligibility. Yet referrals remain vanishingly rare, with no physician in Canada ever being prosecuted. Nationwide, oversight is equally hollow. Ontario flagged 400 plus potential violations with only 4 regulatory referrals. Quebec identified dozens of non-compliant cases with almost no consequences. So, is the government more concerned with protecting access to MAiD than protecting patients?
I think they're more concerned with protecting themselves. Kind of what we got to before. They're sort of governing through virtue, right? They're like, this is the virtuous thing to do. We've made this decision. So we can't put guardrails on it because then we have to admit that we've done something wrong. This is the issue with a lot of government policy. I think it's an important thing to do, actually. I'm going to cut a sidebar for a sec, is when the government passes a piece of legislation or a policy, I think it's important to understand that if admitting that they've made mistakes or putting on effective guardrails for that policy, whatever it may be, is something that should be done at one point or another, understand that it won't happen, because that's an admission of being wrong. It's an admission essentially of guilt here, right? So you have this system now that is ever expanding, the largest in the world. We're killing more people than anywhere else on the planet, per capita and by number at this point. I can't believe BC was third on the list. Is it third? Yeah, third highest at almost 3,000 deaths in a year. Like, this is insane. And for me, this is just another classic case of the same thing. They go, well, we just have to put this in a black box and not do proper reporting, because if we do, then these are going to start going through the court. People are going to start recognizing 500 from BC, 400 from Ontario. No one's been prosecuted. Nothing's been brought forward. So they just go, well, we can't have even one. It's similar to COVID death, right? Remember, they're like, oh, we have to lock down. We have to do this. We have to do that. Well, why are we doing it to healthy people? Because they made the decision that locking down was the right thing to do. And if one old person dies, then the politician's the one that has to wear that death. So they went way over the top with everything. They can't let anything squeak through the cracks at all. Otherwise, they're going to be responsible for something bad happening. Same thing here. So they're just going way over the top to be like, and it varies based on policy. Here, way over the top means putting everything in a black box, not prosecuting anybody and letting them do their thing. And for some reason, I imagine, because I think any party would do this, your policy continues to expand, they're continuing to expand down this line and increase what qualifies for MAiD. What concerns me is we're already the highest in the world, and now we're battling back and forth with a liberal government once again that wants to add mental illness to this list. So at that point, I don't know where we get, because I think in these cases you may be able to loosely justify a number of these things. But when you start doing it for people with mental illness, well, everybody's got mental illness these days. Like you said, everyone's a pill popper. Everyone's got depression. Everyone's on an SSRI. Everybody's this and that and whatever. What are you going to start doing? Lining up classrooms full of kids? Mm-hmm. What are you talking about?
Yeah, and you even look at how dark this has gotten in some places with, this was an article about a year ago, but Quebec told doctors to ignore federal homicide laws in order to go forward with MAiD. So this was because the whole concept of giving prior consent for MAiD. So you're saying, if I'm ever in this condition, off me. But this is a really dark, and don't get me wrong, I can actually even kind of understand that with, let's say, a family member or something, like being like, here's a horse tranquilizer. If I ever get to this point, hit me with that.
Give me the old 10-cent solution, buddy. One right to the side of the head.
But we got to remember how heartless and cold government is. Yes. Because I think there's a difference when, say, if it's somebody that's close to you making that decision or not. But in the case of Quebec, yeah, they're saying, okay, you can administer MAiD to people that are incapacitated. And so that is homicide. They can't consent, prior consent isn't present consent. Like, the argument I've used in the past for this is very similar to even, let's say, sexual consent. It's like, if a woman gives you consent 3 months ago, doesn't mean you have consent today.
Correct.
Like, it's kind of an ongoing negotiation. And this is just blows past all of that. But it's wild that even we're at the point where politicians are telling doctors, forget about homicide laws. But where this is going, I think there's an interesting, scary foreshadowing by Kelsey Sharon, who I think we should probably have on and do a whole episode just about this topic alone, because she's probably the leading dissenter when it comes to MAiD in Canada. But the picture she lays out is pretty crazy.
So the Journal of Death and Dying recently this year of 2025 came out and expressed what Health Canada's plans look like to save money. They are on track starting 2027 to 2047 to save $1.273 trillion by providing 14.7 million Canadians with MAiD rather than palliative care.
What was that number? Say that.
14.7 million Canadians Over 9 million of those are projected to be elderly. Over 4 million of those are projected to be the mentally ill and suicidal. Over 300,000 of those are projected to be the Indigenous population, and then everyone else, addicts, homeless, and otherwise. So Canada's running a eugenics program, and they're planning to expand that with the start of a mentally ill only qualification in 2027. And for those that are find those stats as disgusting as I do, you can go check out on the SAGE journal or the Journal of Death and Dying. They break it all down for you. They go through the numbers. We've also done it on the series as well.
4 million, including people that want to commit suicide.
14.7 altogether.
Yes, that is very disturbing.
That's over a quarter of Canada's population.
Oh yeah. That's wild.
And I wonder if that will be a turning point for the boomers who have been supporting the Liberals unquestionably for the last 30, 40 years, when they finally get to the point where they go, oh, I'm going to make use of all these social programs that I tout as the greatest aspect of Canada, my social security, my retirement, all of this, when they get there in 10, 15 years from now and they go, yeah, so those programs, we can't fund them, but we can kill you if you want, because that's essentially what they're doing. Even I think it was the CBC. It could have been one of the other legacy outlets as well, but this was even years ago. They were writing articles about how much money they could save the healthcare system by expanding MAiD.
Well, yeah, because you save the healthcare, you also save on old age security, GIP, all those other things.
And that's the thing, is they market it as a program of compassion and care, right? And then they put people like us on the back foot for having to try to defend this, going, even me just 2 minutes ago, sitting there going, look, I can understand there's certain circumstances, and like having to tiptoe around it.
Over contextualize, yeah.
To them, that actually isn't a factor at all. And they're just looking at their bottom line going, oh, we need to do something about this population.
That's a good way to save money.
Yeah.
Wow. For me, the stark one, like the elderly one, I don't agree. To be honest with you, I really don't agree with much of this. I really think unless, and look, I'm not in this situation, but you're allowed to have an opinion. My opinion is if you're terminally ill and there's no chance, I can understand it, I guess. I can see the way out. Otherwise, I don't see it. I just don't. I don't think it's appropriate. That's just my feeling, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of my take. But when you start going, well, 4 million people, over 4 million people are going to be exterminated essentially because of mental illness and because they're suicidal. You have a really big problem. Why don't we try to figure that out? Why don't we try to figure out why people are mentally unwell, even though we're driving more and more people down that path, and why people are suicidal? Like, have you never seen the stories of, one popped up the other day on Instagram, and it was a before and after photo, and it was this guy that talked another guy off a bridge, and it was an older white man and a younger black guy, and then they showed them like 20 years later hugging on the bridge, and that guy got his life together and things were great. Suicide happens for a lot of reasons. I don't agree with it, and I'm not wired that way. But here's the thing. When you start making life unaffordable for everybody and you can't put food on the table and you feel like a failure, well, now all of a sudden the guy who would have never even considered it is taking a bullet to the head because he doesn't see any other way out except for maybe life insurance. And I realize that I understand suicide's not an option for life insurance. Maybe he makes it look like an accident. That's not really the point of what I'm trying to say here. What I'm saying effectively, though, is the more the government makes it difficult to live in this country, the more people are going to take that as an option anyway. The government is responsible for a lot of these things. And I really don't think offering euthanasia is the solution to any of it. This is so dark. This country's so fucked.
And even with that argument about people, being in bad shape, again, I can get that there is levels of suffering that I would not want anyone to endure. But then you even look at then I'm smacked in the face with kind of this contradiction between even let's say one of the thinkers that I've been most inspired by or influenced by, which would be Nietzsche. Nietzsche lived in pure pain from the time he was 9 until he died. He actually died in a almost like a psychosis. But he would have excruciating migraines for hours on end. He was almost like physically debilitated by them. So it was like a neurological condition. I don't think they ever actually found out exactly what it was. Again, he lived in like the 1800s, so medicine was very held back. But then, yeah,
just cut him open again.
Yeah,
okay.
But even one of his central philosophies, which was amor fati, which is like the love of fate. So don't just accept life as it happens, but affirm it and actually like the fact that it is the way it is. And so you get this guy that lived in pure suffering, but then developed an extremely influential philosophy as to how to still attack life in a positive manner, even if all the cards are stacked against you. And it's like, okay, how many people are in a position where they have an extreme amount of suffering and they are living through terrible conditions, but the only cultural narratives or institutional narratives that they get is that, yeah, life is really hard. You should just give up and kill yourself.
Yeah.
Imagine if somebody was giving somebody like Nietzsche that at 15, 18 years old was just saying like, oh, hey, life isn't going to be good
Tough
for you.
roll,
You
kid,
should
just
pull
end
it
it today.
And then
What?
all of a sudden the world didn't have one of the greatest philosophers to ever live.
Yep.
And you also, and this is where it even gets deeper as well, as you start to go, okay, people's ideas and the way they live out life are definitely an outgrowth of their circumstances and environment. So you go, how much of his philosophy was actually predicated on his suffering? So it's a very dark question to ask, but you go, maybe if he wasn't suffering, the world wouldn't have been graced with his philosophies at all.
Oh, I agree. It's like you were born through adversity. Like the person that you become, me being a man, the man that I've become has been largely due to adversity, not because of my wins, because of my losses, the things that I had to face and get over. That's really where you grow and you morph into, in my case, the person you want to be. I recognize they're not the same as people feeling suicidal. I understand that. But they have been, like, I put myself through the ringer in many cases. I value those things, especially looking back. In fact, I've gotten to the point that I value them almost at the time now. But one thing I was just thinking of, and this is kind of even worse, if they somehow, I'm just thinking about how dark this is and where it might go. If they somehow tie a life insurance policy to euthanasia, so like, oh no, don't worry, your family will still get X amount of dollars. So like, I'm worth a few bucks. But what if they're like, hey, you can give your family at least 25% of your insurance policy paid out by the government. If we go down that line, I say burn it to the ground.
Yeah.
Because you are going to get people lining up anytime there's a financial crisis and everything, anytime things are tough, which is this country's fate for the next 20 years anyway. And I recognize we're not there and this is speculative. I understand that, but I would not put it past them to implement something like that, as crazy as that is.
Yeah. And, I don't talk about it often, but there was a 2 or 3 year period where I definitely had a mental state in that area. Definitely. So I have a lot of sympathy for people that are living through that level of depression. But I also look at it now that I'm not in that state anymore. And I think back to, if somebody had told me, kind of the only thing that holds you back in that decision a lot is even going like, okay, what's my family and friends going to think about this? How's it going to affect them? What I think ends up happening, and I could have seen myself making these rationalizations if these programs were available to me at the time, is you can start to kind of defer responsibility onto the government. And you can say, well, It's not my decision anymore. They actually agreed with me. So it's not my selfish decision.
They reaffirm it. And they reaffirm it and do the dirty work.
Right. And so you go, oh, yeah. And you can offshore that responsibility onto them. And then all of a sudden that last line of defense of how is this going to affect my loved ones
ends up increasing the rate by 100% or 50% or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
Ugh. Today's podcast is brought to you by All Day Coffee. Do you love your coffee but overdo it sometimes? Get the jitters, a little anxiety, or have sleepless nights if you sneak in a cup just a little too late? Well, I do. That's why we're excited to partner with All Day Coffee, a specialty roaster started by good friends of ours. They make great coffee with different caffeine levels. They have decaf, quarter calf, half calf, or full calf. That means you can still enjoy your morning cup, an afternoon pick-me-up, or an evening brew without the shakes or the crash. Personally, I've switched to half calf and it's been a game changer for me. For a limited time, all new customers get 20% off and free shipping by using the code WELCOME20. That's WELCOME20. Try it now at alldaycoffee.co and see why I made the switch.
All right, moving on to our next story. We've got the watchful eye growing over everyday Canadians. A global surveillance state is rising in plain sight, built under the guise of safety and security. Michel Foucault's metaphor of the panopticon, where inmates internalize control because they might be watched, has been coded into software and adopted by governments. Companies like Palantir provide Five Eyes nations, including Canada, with tools to fuse personal, financial, and digital data into systems of total observation. In Canada, this has meant predictive policing by the RCMP, spyware that hijacks private devices, and even the illegal tracking of 33 million citizens' cell data during COVID. The paradox is stark. Ordinary Canadians face audits, flagged bank transfers, and watch lists for small infractions, while elites and cartels move billions through real estate and finance unchecked. This unequal application of surveillance, discipline for the masses while the powerful get impunity, echoes Foucault's warning. What emerges is not freedom, but the architecture of control, with Canada as a junior partner in a global panopticon. So at what point does this surveillance state cross the line from protection to authoritarianism?
A long time ago.
Yeah.
It's just insane.
Yeah.
I don't think people understand Palantir well enough. That company is wild. It is like the number one, I think right now I would consider it the number one defense company, even though it's not really what it is. But we live in a world of data, and we live in this world of sort of predictive action from predictive policing and predictive action from the government. The fact that they can sort of fuse all these things together, like you live in this world where you're like, okay, well, we don't want centralization. They're like, no problem. We can do it anyway. They can just grab all this stuff, and that's essentially what they're doing, right? So I think what's really important over the next couple of years is that we find a way to decentralize using things like blockchain. I actually really think we're hitting this tipping point where it's like either give up or you got to make a move soon because you're losing all your troops. That's how it feels like for me. But when it comes to this protection authoritarianism thing, look, I think that there's a need for a group like the CIA or CSIS. I think that there's a need to understand what's going on around the world and what people are trying to do to your country, because we live in a time where everyone's always scheming, everyone's always backdoor deals, everyone's always trying to, like, we live in a world where scarcity is the macro idea, macro concept, macro feeling, where everybody's trying to get one up on another person. They're trying to leverage X to get Y, and everything's broken into factions. And there's a lot of dirty things that happen in this world. It's unfortunate, but it is what it is. So I can understand needing some sort of apparatus in place to keep an eye on things to make sure that you can take action because everyone else is going to do the same thing. It's kind of like having an army. You don't want to use it, but it's important that you have it. Using it against your own citizens, though, for me, really is the line in a democracy. It's really where things start to go backwards. And I think we're so far gone. There was this moment in 2016 when Mitch McConnell was on TV and he got thrown a random question at the time. And what it was is Trump tweeted something. So he was in an interview on TV. Everything's always pre-planned. Everything's always organized. I've been on TV. You know how it works. So the host, I forget exactly who it was. It might have been like a Rachel Maddow type. Might have actually been her. Anyway, so they go, hey, I hate to throw this at you, but this just came in right now. And they read Trump's tweet. And it's to the effect of this. Trump is going to go after the CIA and the deep state. And it was interesting because what you saw from McConnell was a genuine response. And he was, I'm going to paraphrase, but there are 7 ways from Sunday for the CIA to get back at you. If that man thinks he's going at the deep state and the CIA, there are 7 ways from Sunday for them to get back at you. As soon as the world heard that, you have to understand that democracy is dead. You have to understand that he is not the leader. The president, the prime minister, they are not the leaders. It is quote unquote the deep state, but it is the institution. It is the managerial class. It is those people that are running the world. You don't have a democracy. And for those people to maintain control, they have to operate in this space of constant surveillance under the idea of I'm protecting you, but ultimately it is authoritarianism. So we've been in this state for a very long time.
And Well, you see that in Canada, this whole surveillance state is definitely taking hold. So the OPP already uses Palantir Gotham, which is its crime analysis concept.
I'll give him that.
But specifics are withheld, so the public doesn't know exactly how the OPP is using this software. But there's also talks that the Palantir software could end up becoming essentially the foundation for the digital ID and border surveillance stuff as well, tying everything into one apparatus. But then, actually, what I think is really interesting is I heard somebody pontificating about this, and it would be definitely a tinfoil hatty concept, but I mean, kind of checks out. So the idea was that DOGE was just a Trojan horse for Palantir, because a lot of the individuals that ended up working for Department of Government Efficiencies were straight from Palantir. They were Palantir employees.
Huh.
And what ended up happening was, they wanted to take this software approach to dealing with government inefficiency, right? Scan all of these programs.
Sure.
Where's the money going? Build this database, get all of these different government
access to everything.
Centralized. Well, what did people get? They didn't get the actual cuts or
Not
anything like that.
Anyway.
So there was no real movement on the Department of Government Efficiency as far as what they said they were going to do, but it definitely did build this centralized infrastructure of a database. And so that's there. And maybe that was the whole goal in the first place.
That's interesting.
Was giving this.
That's dark, because I like Elon, and now that makes me skeptical.
Well, and even Palantir with Peter Thiel is like hand in hand with Donald Trump. He's one of his closest guys. And so you go,
Thiel's done well. He's worth like $20 billion now.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
And even Palantir as well was definitely funded in the early days and has worked alongside the CIA throughout all of it as well. But going on to this, because in the summary of the original article that I wrote on this, it kind of goes over the Foucault metaphor here, but I think this is a very interesting concept that, I'm no fan of Foucault's broader philosophies. He was one of the postmodernists. He was definitely a kind of an outgrow of Marxism and all of this kind of stuff. But this concept of the panopticon is really interesting, which is he likened a surveillance state to a prison as if you have a central, like, imagine a big spherical building where you've got cells all along the spheres on different floors, and then in the middle, the center, you've got a watchtower with two guards. So you can have two guards watching the entire prison.
Right.
His point is that even though at any given point, not every prisoner is being watched, the very possibility that they could be being watched at any point drives forward obedience and changes their behavior.
For sure.
And what I think was his most interesting concept with this is that back in the early days, we used to have torture and physical ramifications for when people stepped out of line.
Yes.
Now, I'm not saying that's ideal by any means, but what he's saying is it's almost worse, because we used to, after somebody was guilty, torture them and had physical ramifications, but now it's a constant attack on almost the human soul.
Yes.
Of just I'm being watched, so I shouldn't do anything that can remotely step out of line. And you hear people talk like this all the time, which is crazy. So
self-censorship on steroids.
Or they go, well, surveillance isn't that bad because I have nothing to hide. Take a look. I don't really care. And you go, sure, maybe right now you're not breaking any rules, and so you don't fear any consequences of them looking at you. But what happens once this system is in place and then they change the rules?
What I don't even like is just the idea of traffic cams, speed cams.
Yeah.
Like everyone's driving slow because you're like, oh, look, and don't get me wrong, I don't think you need to speed around like an asshole all the time. But again, that's just that same thing as they're getting you used to it. There's speed cameras everywhere. If you drive any more than 11, 12 kilometers over the limit, here's your $85 ticket.
Right.
So you're just like, okay, I'll drive slow. Look, like they're basically building obedience and self-censoring into every part of your life.
Mm-hmm.
It is disturbing. It is like you have this like constant feeling of stress.
You just become
all the
this
time.
machine.
Yeah, it's interesting too. Like I even like I've noticed it with the CRA. Like everybody, I know a lot of people are dealing with issues with the CRA. We're dealing with them. We're not wrong. We're dealing with issues with the CRA where we're not at all wrong. They are in the wrong, but they're still making our lives difficult. So you have this thing in your mind like, oh, when are they going to come at me with something stupid again? And I recognize it's different. But that's a way that I can honestly relate to this right now, to be like, no, these people are acting viciously outside of the purview of how they should be operating. They're operating illegally. They're attacking a lot of small businesses and a lot of people that can't afford to fight back. And they'll come at you anytime. And it's just like, you kind of always have to feel like you're watching your back, and now amp that up and put it everywhere. Ooh, gah.
Yeah. And this is, I think, maybe, circling back to our very first topic about the out of control crime and chaos in Canada, and our government seemingly not giving you any ability to defend yourself without repercussions, at least.
Of course.
Then, hey, maybe this chaos serves a purpose in the sense of, oh, hey guys, everybody is so out of control here. Yeah, we don't have the ability to jail these people because we don't have the infrastructure.
Yes.
But what we can do is create this digital surveillance.
What do you
structure.
think about the Minority Report?
Yeah.
Huh? You're like, oh God. You're right. That's actually a really, really good point. Create the problem, provide the solution, all of it's government related. It's kind of like the Patriot Act, right? So 9/11, they implement the Patriot Act. You'll go, well, they needed to do it. Guys, they tried to pass it 2 or 3 times before 9/11. And then all of a sudden they had a big enough incident where they're like, let's ram it through. We need this. And here we are. So yeah, that's actually a very good point. Something I would keep an eye on.
Well, and it's following definitely the pattern of Yuri Bezmenov's idea of subversion, which is at first you get demoralization, destabilization, crisis, then normalization. So, for instance, the demoralization to this whole process would have been everyday people, Canadian landowners, the people that go to work, the capitalists, blah, blah, blah. They are the oppressors. Everyday Canadians are the oppressors. The violent criminals are actually the victims. And so we go through this 5 to 10 year process of just social demoralization. And then things start to destabilize. So you actually start to get these criminals acting out more and more and more. Everything starts to get worse and worse for the everyday people. Then you find yourself in this crisis, which we're currently finding ourselves in. And then they can bring in their solution.
Yeah.
And then they normalize that and they go, this is the world now.
That makes sense. It actually, what's interesting is I'm doing a piece on Canada 2.0 right now, which is a super complex thing that I'm trying to put together, just because I think it's interesting and I think it's important. But I'm working through the why right now, and the why is speculative, right? Because you don't really know why. There's whys from different angles. But I think one of the whys that I'm going to include after this conversation is exactly what you just said. If you continue to make the country untenable for regular Canadians by creating a 2-tier justice and 2-tier government assistance programs and all these other issues where you're favoring one side of society over the other, and it's basically creating resentment and chaos, well, now you have this solution where you implement these tools that give you control over society because it's necessary. It is the solution we need. So that's actually an interesting perspective that I'm going to drop in there.
All right. Anything else you wanted to add today?
That is everything.
Before we get out of here, don't forget to head over to our Substack where you can sign up for our newsletter, which goes out 5 days a week, and find all the sources that we discuss in this podcast. BlendrNews.com. That's BLENDR news.com. We thank you for listening, and we'll catch you next time.
Bye, everybody.